For the past couple of months, there's been one question plaguing everyone's mind in the Smash Ultimate community. What should we do about Steve? This character has seemingly been taking over the meta out of nowhere. Players who had never placed well before are picking up Steve and are winning majors with him. Now, this video is not here to discredit Onin's, Yanni's, Akola's, or others' wins or top placings, but is rather here to analyze the situation regarding this character in relation to other characters in history. In each of the 4 past Smash games, there's been one character who is clearly leagues above the rest, and each different community took a different approach to dealing with their oppressive nature. From Smash 64 Pikachu to Melee Fox, Brawl Meta Knight, and Smash 4 Bayonetta, each character's dominance in their meta was taken differently. Today, we will be looking at each of the past 4 Smash competitive scenes to see what went well and what did not work in their dealings with the dominant character, and use history to analytically see what the community should do about its current problem. There is some way to solve the Steve problem plaguing the Smash Ultimate meta right now. We just have to look back to move forward. The best character in the first Smash game, Smash 64, is Pikachu. In order to understand how the community dealt with the yellow rat in his first outing, we must first understand what makes Pikachu so good in Smash 64. This game is notorious for 2 primary aspects: long extended combos with most characters having a simple 0 to death, and poor recovery. In the first category, Pikachu does have some insane combos, but they are nothing particularly special compared to the rest of the cast. When competing with Kirby's up tilt and Captain Falcon's up air, moves such as Pikachu's up tilt do not really stand out. On the other hand, however, Pikachu shines in his recovery. Pikachu's quick attack up B is the best in the game for so many different reasons. It travels the furthest in the game, it's invincible when recovering, snaps to ledge extremely early, allows Pikachu to go off stage for edge guards, and much more. In addition to these 2 aspects, Pikachu has moves like Thunder that allow him to pressure and kill opponents above him without even putting himself in danger, as well as his incredibly strong smash attacks. He's quite fast in the air and on the ground, and is just a really strong character overall. This leads him to have winning matchups on the entire cast, except for some maybe debatable even matchups on some top tiers. But, other than his recovery, Pikachu does not have one aspect that is in a different category than the rest of the game. He is the best aspects overall, but that does not mean he is the best of each individual aspect, just the best of the sum of them. Pikachu is clearly a dominant force, but not one that invalidates the other players to play the game. He's the best character for sure, but still allows others to compete. In this video, Smash 64 Pikachu is definitely the least egregious of the best characters in their respective games. However, Pikachu led to a major problem at the beginning of the game's life cycle. Sure, Pikachu players were the most prominent, but they were not overwhelmingly offensive, since there was still top-level character representation for most of the cast. This all changed in 2017, however, when the Smash 64 community started talking about a Pikachu ban. Their thoughts were, from both some Pikachu and non-Pikachu mains, that over time he was just becoming too dominant, and major tournaments were becoming saturated with Pikachu mains. For these reasons, players such as Super Boom Fan and Kirokiropi pushed hard for this ban. On the other side of the ban were the people who had 2 opinions. One was that there was no need for Pikachu to be banned since counterplay would develop over time, and the other was that banning Pikachu would lead to a larger issue in the scene. Pikachu is the best character, was better than the rest, but was also the limiting potential on other characters such as Kirby or Captain Falcon. With Pikachu gone, these characters would take his place and act as a much more oppressive head character, and would worsen the scene. Despite a long and arduous battle between the 2 sides, the opposition to the ban prevailed, and the scene turned out better because of it. While it is unknown how the meta would have done without Pikachu, it is confirmed that over time, serious counterplay to the rat had been discovered, as people had been forced to put in extensive time to beat this character. Right now, Pikachu is still the best, but there's a lot more character representation at the top than there was a few years ago. To gather points for our question about Steve, let's take an argument from both sides to have, and save them to evaluate later for Ultimate. As for Pro-Ban, they believe that this was the right option due to the dominance of Pikachu in the meta, which caused an over-centralized game. On the other hand, the anti-banners believed that counterplay would develop, as it did, to push Pikachu's dominance down a bit. In the case of Smash 64, I believe the community did the right thing by deciding not to ban Pikachu. This was better for the meta overall. The next character that's going to be looked at is Melee Fox. Fox is the best character in Melee, but unlike the other 3 best characters on this list, he's actually loved by the community. Fox's time in Melee has been one of almost constant dominance, but the perspective into how the melee scene dealt with this space animal will show how the Ultimate scene should deal with similar threats, if they want to extend the longevity of their game. First off, why is Fox the best in Melee? Well, this essentially comes down to the Melee engine, and the movement that Fox gains because of it. He, along with other characters, have the ability to wave dash, L cancel, and other Melee-specific techs. But for some reason, Fox is at the top or near the top in nearly all these categories. In addition, there's one move that controls Fox's game, his down B, Shine. The ability to jump cancel, wave shine, double shine, shine spike, and so many more maneuvers with this move brings Fox up on the tier list. He does, however, have some of the fastest ground moves in the game, the most extensive list of combos, excellent killing power and setups, a good yet linear recovery, and a solid matchup against almost everyone in the cast. Fox also has his lasers to prevent campy gameplay, his edge guarding and ledge trapping setups, and a slew of other abilities that many characters in this game lack. So, overall, Fox is amazing on his own right, but the Melee-specific engine is really what brings him up tremendously and allows him to become the best character in the game. But, even with this being the case, the Melee scene never really disliked Fox, as he is the best single character, with an interestingly positive reception from almost the whole community. Even though Fox is the best character in the game, Melee players love him, and think that his fast-paced and aggressive gameplay doesn't actually hurt the meta, but rather saves and helps it. In a game where speed is the core objective, Fox's attributes align perfectly and make him the staple of the game, not because he is overpowered, but because he represents the pinnacle of a Melee character. His creativity in combos and gameplay kept him interesting over the years, and this encouraged other players in the scene to love him. Due to this, there was never any prominent talk about banning Fox in Melee. One of the reasons that this is the case in middle-level play is that he's quite technical, and his crazy combos and movement are only possible with an equally crazy amount of time and dedication put into training him. The scene argues that the skill level requirements justifies the brokenness. However, this argument falls flat at the top level of gameplay, where almost everyone at the top has the time, dedication, and therefore skill to put into the game, so it's more of a matter of mind games. Since Melee has been around for so long, and the tier list is fairly stagnant at this point, it has allowed players to work on finding counterplay to Fox that was unknown before. This is why there is really no other side to this argument. No one in the scene, whether you hate the character or not, believes that there's something in the rule set that should be done to alter the game and Fox's place in it. So, to look over the points for Melee, the community believes that Fox represents the game of Melee, and so altering his role in it would alter the game's representation itself. While there are no pro banners, people who dislike Fox have the mindset that they'll be able to practice and find ways to outplay this character, as so many have done before. With time and practice, their Fox situation will be fixed. Now, we get to the big one. Meta Knight in Brawl is not only the best character in Brawl, but also the best character in all of Smash. He's the most telling character in this whole list, but again, why is this the case? First, let's start off with his attributes. Meta Knight is an extremely fast character, with 5 mid-air jumps, a gliding mechanic, and the fastest frame data in the game overall. On top of all of this, he has almost an infinite recovery, infinite stalling tactics, and infinite mobility. As for his moves, all 4 of Meta Knight's special moves are some of the best in the game, and even series. His Mach Tornado is the best move in the game because it lasts forever, completely covers Meta Knights from all sides, and can be used as a recovery, for movement, to chase down opponents, to finish combos. I mean, it can literally do anything. His up B, Shuttle Loop, is, again, almost an infinite recovery, and can turn into his Glide, which gives him other movement options around the stage, and just means that Meta Knight can go as deep as he wants off stage to edgeguard and make it back no matter what. All of Meta Knight's frame data is impeccable. He has the ability to do 3 up airs in 1 short hop. He can shark with his up airs on the stage, down air camp, the most hilarious thing in Smash, in my opinion. And his range with his sword is more than Marth's in some cases. Also, all of his moves have priority and are transcendent. There's literally nothing I could say to give justice to how amazing Meta Knight is in Brawl, since he is just too good. I know there are so many things I didn't even say, but there's just nothing like him. Meta Knight was the best character in all of Smash, and, like most of the other Smash games, the community did not like having him around. As the best character in the whole series, it would make sense that if anyone ever got banned, it would be Meta Knight. And this would be the case, so it will give us a lot of actually good information as opposed to the hypothetical scenarios in other games. After Meta Knight took over the meta, dominating top 8s at every single major, and not so major events, the community decided he was too much. The community initially tried to ban the character in 2009, but failed to do so, but eventually ended up getting it done in 2011. This was not necessarily because Meta Knight dominated the meta, of which it played a part, but it was more so since he over-centralized the game. This seems to be a buzzword around this topic, so let's define it here. When a character over-centralizes the game, in Smash terms, it means that a competitive scene and tier list is no longer defined by how all characters can relate to each other, but instead only to one top-tier character. Players change their whole style of play just to counter Meta Knight. Characters shot up and plummeted on the tier list just to their relationship with Meta Knight. Since he was so good and popular, it was always assumed that at least one player in a match would play Meta Knight, and so the scene evolved this way. Since this was not fun nor good for the viewers, the scene actually banned Meta Knight, but not all problems were solved. Top players who had played the character started to notify TOs of banned Meta Knight tournaments that they would not attend unless he was put back on the roster. This caused even more controversy, because since the best players all played Meta Knight, they wouldn't attend, and viewership got even worse than before. Because of this, the scene reversed the ban in about 2014, and went back to allowing Meta Knight in tournaments. To pull away from this, the pro-brand crowd wanted a ban since they were believed, and they were right, that Meta Knight over-centralized the game around himself, and since he was everywhere, it worsened the viewing experience. On the other hand, since all of the pros played Meta Knight, they wanted him back, and in addition, the crowd thought that removing Meta Knight would cause another issue: the Ice Climbers. Once Meta Knight was removed, the second best character, the Ices, became an issue as well, as they began to dominate the meta with no character legally above them to counter or stop them. With all this in mind, let's take a look at the most modern issue of the character, the last Smash 4 DLC, Bayonetta. The most recent of these best characters is Smash 4's Bayonetta. As the final DLC character, she just came in and swept up the entire scene in a storm. Let's talk about what makes her so good and also so hated in the scene. First off, there were her incredible combos that could essentially do a 0 to death on any character from anywhere on the stage. By hitting a single up tilt, side B, up B, or tons of other moves, Bayo's insane mobility in the air with her tons of options allowed her to take opposing players to the top of the blast zone and kill them extremely early. This meant that basically one read from this character would result in a stock taken, and in a 2-stock game, this basically meant that the Bayo just needed about 2 or 3 reads or openings to win a match. Another one of her issues was with her Witch Time, her down B. With this, Bayonetta could activate a pseudo counter, which slowed down time for her opponent. A pretty sick concept, but the issue is that even with countering a small jab, the opponent was slowed down for a few seconds. And that was the single opening Bayonetta needed to take the stock. She could also never get edge guarded due to her insane, non-linear recovery, and she could go out to get deep kills. She started to over-centralize the game just like Meta Knight did, and took over all the top 8s. At major tournaments, despite the large cast, almost everyone played or secondaried Bayonetta, or Cloud, but that's a different topic. People did not like Bayonetta, not because she was the best, but more since she made it impossible for the opponent to actually play the game normally. As a result, the community decided to take matters into their own hands. Bayonetta caused a ton of controversy in the Smash 4 scene, but despite all this bickering, the scene never really got anywhere with their banning plans. After she was announced and put into the game, she started dominating the meta pretty quickly. However, there was one thing that could save the game: a final balance patch for Bayo. Sakurai released one final patch to calm down Bayonetta, the harshest nerfs ever seen in the series, but sadly, this still did not calm the storm, as she was still incredibly broken. At this point, the community wanted to take it into their own hands, and thought about the idea of a ban. The reasons were for both Bayo's reversal power, as well as her oversaturation of the scene. This caused the community to consider a ban in 2017 and 2018, but since Smash Ultimate was right around the corner when this conversation really started, it was never put into fruition, and she was kept legal to maintain the meta in almost all large scenes around the world. There's not a lot to consider with long-lasting effects since the Smash 4 scene died right after Ultimate was released, but we can take away a few points. The pro-ban side thought that Bayonetta should be banned due to her not allowing other players to play the game. Furthermore, random players were picking up the character, learning her basic combos, and defeating top-tier players with little practice or time. On the other hand, the anti-ban side believed that there was counterplay to this character, with the joking line, "just SDI," as well as saying that other characters could compete with her. While this was not actually viable, this group of people believe that there are ways to beat Bayonetta that had just not been discovered yet. With all this information about other characters gathered to help us analyze what to do about Steve, we can finally do what we were sent here to do. But doing this requires one more thing. What exactly about Steve makes him so good? To talk about this, I have a special guest. Take it away, MockRock.
While Smash Ultimate and every Smash game for that matter has always seemed to have one character or another in the community's crosshairs, Steve takes that slot by a landslide right now, and the reasons aren't that hard to spot. Steve was announced as the second character in Fighters Pass 2, and his early showings were actually pretty modest, far more so than some of his peers. It really wasn't until months after the return to in-person tournaments that the first signs of this changing started to peek out, and since then his gathering momentum has been pretty much completely unparalleled. Not only is he turning out to be very good, which, hey, that alone is always going to get you on a few hit lists, but he's also turning out to be really good at not letting his opponent play Smash. More than any other character in the series, Steve's design forces him to be played extremely defensively. Characters like, say, Samus or Pac-Man may be at their most optimal when they get to spend the game at arm's length, but Steve players literally have no choice. Attacking depletes their resources, and if they don't retreat to replenish them through mining, they'll eventually be totally unable to fight. Even compared to Olimar, who up to this point is probably the closest thing we've seen to Steve's design, this is just a whole new level of constantly being compelled to step back from the fray. Needless to say that campy strategies don't tend to go over especially well with a lot of players, and Steve takes things even further beyond with his ability to terraform the stage, making his opponent deal with blocks before they can deal with him mining off in the corner. Once those blocks are gone, the other player might be able to finally fight Steve, or they could fight his minecart instead, a multifaceted burst movement tool and projectile command grab in a single move with a mountain of follow-ups available whether it connects on the ground or in the air, so, you know, that's fun. Okay, but what if you truly manage to make it through all of this and actually definitively get to fight Steve head-to-head? Well, I mean, if that part was easy, we probably wouldn't be here, eh? Steve's close quarters moveset is phenomenal, with multiple disjointed, extremely fast, and unusually safe combo starters that can lead to some of the highest damage output any character in this 80+ roster is capable of, or shockingly often, even a stock loss. This is especially true when he has access to diamond tools, which he can craft after he's done enough mining, and by the way, for his opponent, preventing this amount of mining over the course of a 3-stock game essentially just isn't on the table. It's less a question of whether he's going to pull out a diamond and more a question of how many are coming after that. And after it arrives, all bets are off. Diamond tools are still very capable of the fancy combos while also opening up slugfests that would make the angriest cavemen proud. You go ahead and mash that back air on shield. If it connects, they're dead at 80, and if it whiffs, what? You think you're getting punished? None of this is even getting into his notoriously versatile down air, the horrible yet hilarious things a simple jab can do if it touches Fox, the list goes on. So, saying Steve's unpopular among a lot of Smash players right now is probably putting it lightly, but now for the question behind this build-up. Is all of this enough to warrant a ban on Steve in the competitive Smash scene? That's as much of the script as I've got in front of me, so I'm gonna leave that one up to you. Have fun with the comments on this one either way, dude.
Now we have the two pieces to analyze our question. We have the relationship between Steve and the Smash Ultimate scene, and what he can do in the game, as well as how top-tier characters were handled in other games. The first and biggest factor to consider is that Steve is not actually the best character in the game, or that is at least not what the community unanimously believes. This makes it tricky to ban him, since there are characters that are better than him, who are no way considered for a ban. Never once has the general community thought to get rid of Pikachu or Joker. We can keep this point in the back of our heads as we go through the 8 criteria from before. You might be wondering, why would we use this past criteria to establish a conclusion about a new game? But this video's goal is to produce a ruling based on facts, so using these past examples gives us empirical data to focus on. Hypothetical reasoning is useful, but it gives a much more opinionated conclusion, which is not the point of this video. Let's start with the pro-ban reasons. First, Steve is over-centralizing the game. This is somewhat true. With the rising number of Steve players, he is currently popular in the meta, for sure, but in recent tournaments there are other characters that are much more popular, such as Rob and Pyra and Mithra. So this argument doesn't really follow and should be thrown out. Next is that Steve does not have any counterplay, which may be true at the moment, but is not something that can be altered. Each day, the counter Steve meta increases and grows with new strategies, such as light letting Steve mine, allowing him to beat a Cola, tweaks barrels to blocks approach, or Dabuz pushing Steve off his own crafting table. Third, he is worsening the viewing experience. This is probably the most viable reason, but this alone is not a full reason to ban him. Just because viewers do not like a character, that does not mean they have any right to be banned. The final argument is that Steve does not let others play the game. This does not hold much value either, because aside from his jabs to F-smash on fast followers, all of his long combos are semi-reasonable, and could be avoided with better spacing and gameplay. As for the anti-ban camp, The first reason was that counterplay would develop. As seen in the example given before, this will continue over time, and is a point for the anti-banners. Next, the idea that Steve represents the game can be thrown out, as it is not applicable since he does not. From Brawl, the idea that banning him would lead to a more dominant character is in the same vein. But from Smash 64, the idea that others could compete with him is true, seeing as Steve players are not winning every tournament. Overall, this leads to a half argument for 3 for the pro-ban arguments, and 2 for 2 in the anti-ban arguments, leading to the conclusion that Steve should not be banned. Keep in mind that this does not mean that you have to like or dislike Steve. There are tons of characters in the game that the community doesn't like, who are still in the scene. I want to thank MockRock for helping with this video, and thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell. Despite Steve's hatred by the Smash community, the conclusion is that there's no reason to ban him. And as always, let's go Islanders.